Let's wait for people to come in and join us. I believe we are ready to start now. So welcome and thank you for joining us at our IELTS Talks webinar. Joining us today is Rose Harvey, an experienced and successful IELTS preparation teacher from Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. Rose will discuss her top 10 tips for IELTS writing, covering both academic and general training. We'll finish with a 15-minute question and answer session, so make sure to ask your questions in the Zoom Q&A box, or if you're joining us on Facebook, please leave your comments in the comments section and we'll try to answer as many as we can today. Without further ado, I'm excited to hand over to you, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. So welcome today, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here today. I'm going to take you through our top 10 tips for IELTS writing. Before I start, I am an English language teacher from Macquarie University, and I also work as an IELTS teacher and also work on an online course that we have called IELTS Online. So we help thousands of students prepare for their IELTS test and for their IELTS writing test. I chose IELTS writing today because I think this is the part of the test that we get the most questions about at Macquarie University. And this is also the test that I think students seem to worry a lot about. So I'm hoping that today I can help you feel more confident for your IELTS writing test. So first, I would just like to know, a little bit about yourself. So in the chat box, could you please introduce yourself to me? What is your name and where are you from? And I'd really like to know which IELTS exam you're taking. Maybe you don't know yet, and that's okay. Today's webinar will help you with tips for both academic and general training. But please tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your name, and which IELTS exam you're taking. And we can see what people are doing. Also, we have people from India, which is great. I'm sure we've got people taking both academic and general training. Alvin is taking academic. So the good news is that if you're taking academic, the tips today will help you, and the same for general as well. There's a lot of people from India and Bangladesh. Welcome, everyone. It's in Egypt. It's great to have so many people from different parts of the world here today, and welcome whatever time of day you're joining us at. So without any further ado, let's move on to look at the first of the tips. Sorry, everyone, my slides are clicking through very slowly. Okay, so the first tip is to make sure that you understand the different tasks. What this means is understanding what you need to do in each of the tests. So for general training, you have 60 minutes, and your task 1, for 20 minutes, you should write a letter requesting information or explaining a situation. There are 7 common letter types, and they're listed there. They include an apology letter, an invitation, an arrangement, and a complaint, and some other types there. For the academic test, your task 1, again, you have 20 minutes, and you must write a short report about the main features of a graph or graphic. There are a number of possible graphs you may be given. You may get a bar chart, a line graph, a table, or a number of other types of graphs or images, and you should write a report describing this. Then task 2 is the same or similar for academic and general training. For this, you have 40 minutes and you must write an academic essay. You should write with a formal style, and we will look more closely at what this means later in the webinar. There are usually 5 essay types, And it's important, which I will explain soon, to make sure that you identify which type of essay you need to write. For example, are you being asked for your opinion, or to describe a problem and solution? Or are you being asked about advantages and disadvantages? So my first tip is to make sure that you understand the different tasks and the different questions. Then you can move on to looking at the questions. My tip 2 is to make sure that you read the questions carefully. Now, I know that on IELTS test day, it's very stressful and you have many things to do and many things to remember. And it can be tempting to save time and just look at the question or skim the question. But this doesn't actually save time. It is important that you spend time to read the question carefully. You must identify what type of question is being asked, and you also must answer the exact question. If you don't read the question carefully, then you'll actually spend more time maybe writing the wrong question or feeling a little bit confused about what you're supposed to do. Also, understanding the question and reading the question carefully is key to responding to the public banned descriptors, which we will also look at later. So don't try and save time and start writing really quickly. Make sure you take time to read the question carefully. Now, how do you do that? So you can read it, but there are some steps that you can follow to make sure that you identify the right parts of the question. First of these is to identify the topic words. Each essay will have a general topic. For example, this is an example for task 2. Sorry, I should have said. Each essay will have a general topic. For example, the essay may be asking you about the internet or the environment, and you must first identify this. Get a general idea on what your essay is asking you to write. But you need to make sure that you understand the essay on a more specific basis. And this part, step 2, is what people often miss or misunderstand if they do not spend enough time reading the question. So you must identify the micro topic or limiting words. These tell you exactly what the essay question is asking you. For example, if the general topic is the internet, the micro topic or limiting words may ask you about whether or not the internet causes health problems, or whether or not the internet should be given to students for free. They are the specific topics that you must talk about rather than just the internet in general. Step 3 is to identify the instruction words. This links to what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned the different types of essays. These instruction words will tell you exactly which type of essay you need to write. If the question says, do you agree or disagree, you know that this is asking you about your opinion. If the question asks about advantages or disadvantages, you must write a different type of essay. Again, writing the correct type of essay is key to getting the score that you want in the banned descriptors. So you've looked at the question and now you're ready to write. Tip 3 is that you must write the right amount of words. So you must reach the minimum word limit. Now, most people will know that for task 1, that is 150 words, and for task 2, that is 250 words, sorry. However, sometimes people may think that it is a good idea to write many words more than the minimum word count. And my tip is that this is not necessary, and also it can be negative. So whilst you must reach the word limit for your particular task, don't write too much. There's a number of reasons for this. Writing more can lead to an increase in errors. The more you write, the more chance you have of maybe making a grammatical or lexical error. Also, you're more likely to go off topic. The more you write, the more you may include ideas that are not relevant for that paragraph or that section or that essay or task. Also, there are no bonus marks for going over the minimum word count by a lot. You don't go up band scores because you wrote 500 words. So what you should do is write effectively and precisely. Also, we'll look in a minute at how important editing is and checking your work for errors. Obviously, the more you write, the more difficult it is to edit and find your grammatical and vocabulary errors. So what you should do is make every word count. It is important that every word and every sentence you write in IELTS, you're writing that for a reason. To do this, look at and understand the public band descriptors for your particular task in the test you are taking. So you need to understand what you need to do to get a certain band score, and we will look at this later, and then do that, but don't spend time adding extra information or adding extra sentences that don't directly relate to a reason that you're doing this in the band score. Another solution to this is practice. Practice writing essays, letters, or responses that are around the word limit. They're over the word limit, but they are not that much higher. Another key solution is plan, and make sure you understand the structure that you need to follow and stay with this structure. So, having said that, let's have a look at how you can write in clear paragraphs and follow a structure. Now, because there are people here doing academic and general, I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail about the exact structure you need to follow for each task. But what I will say is, make sure you follow a clear structure with clear paragraphs, and each paragraph must have a clear topic. For example, for task 2, which is relevant for both general training and academic, the essay should usually have 4 paragraphs: an introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Each of those body paragraphs should have a clear topic. So you need to be able to look at your paragraphs and identify what the clear topic of that paragraph is. If a body paragraph has multiple topics, or it is confusing what the topic of the body paragraph is, it is difficult to get above a certain band score. So make sure that your body paragraphs have clear topics. This can also help you with reaching word limit and staying near word limit. Now, each of those body paragraphs should have a topic sentence, and that will also help you stay with one topic per paragraph. So you have a structure, you have a general structure, and it's very important to go into the exam knowing which structure you are going to follow, and that you are going to write your letter, your response, or your essay following that structure. And you're going to use those specific paragraphs. But you also need to look at coherence and cohesion, and this is assessed in the band descriptors. So you need to make sure that each of your paragraphs makes sense and is written with appropriate grammar and vocabulary, and that the order of your sentences are logical. Now, writing in a logical way is important, and this means that each sentence has a clear relationship to the sentence that comes before and after. How can you achieve this logical writing? First is to make sure that you read the question and then decide on how you will group your ideas into paragraphs. So think about what you will write in paragraph 1, in paragraph 2, or in each section of your response. Make sure your paragraph has one clear topic. And then make sure that your ideas are progressing logically, that when you write one sentence, the next sentence has a strong relationship to the sentence before it. Then when you've finished writing, and we'll look at this shortly, you'll move on to your editing and you should read through your paragraphs. You should make sure that your sentences within your paragraph flow logically. So make sure that there's a clear reason. You can see if you read your paragraph, and you should be doing this when you're practicing. If you read your paragraph and you're reading a sentence and then you read another sentence and it is confusing why those sentences are next to each other, that is probably an issue with coherence and cohesion. And you should look at creating a better relationship or looking at the order of your sentences. Coherence and cohesion is also impacted by cohesive devices. Cohesive devices are words like however, in contrast, as a result, in addition. And using enough and correct cohesive devices is key to constructing clear paragraphs. So it's important that you understand what these cohesive devices mean, what punctuation they need, and also how you can use them. So if you think that cohesive devices is something you need to work on, start doing some extra practice in that area. And these are assessed in the band descriptors. Okay, moving on to tip 5. My tip 5 is do not memorize answers. Now, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's anyone here today who's going to admit that they've tried this. Has anybody ever done this? I know a lot of my students have told me in the past that they have memorized answers for IELTS. Now, I'm not here to judge. I am just here, I'm here to help. So I'm here to advise, please don't memorize model answers in order to try and pass your IELTS writing test. We would not recommend this. So there are a number of reasons for this. The first of these is that, remember I was talking about that you need to read the question carefully and make sure that you write the answer that answers that question. It is very unlikely that the question you get will be the exact model answer that you memorized. So the chances of that are almost impossible. So it's not a good test preparation strategy to do that. Also, there are issues of integrity and academic integrity in IELTS, in memorizing an essay or a response or a letter. And IELTS requires you to compose a piece of writing using your own original ideas. Now, if you memorize a model answer and write that, and then you're off topic, you risk not getting a very high band score for writing at all. Also, another reason is that it is very difficult for most of us to remember an entire essay correctly and accurately. So it is very likely that whatever you memorize, when you write it or type it on test day, when you are quite stressed and under time pressure, you will probably remember it with errors. So one of my biggest tips is do not memorize model answers. What can you do though? Well, you can read model IELTS answers, definitely read them. They can be very, very helpful in helping you understand the structure that you should follow and helping you learn how to develop ideas. They can also be very, very helpful to build grammar and vocabulary. So definitely read them, but do not memorize them. Use them to guide your preparation and your development of your structure and style. You should also familiarize yourself with typical IELTS essay questions, mainly talking about essays here, but also typical task 1 letters and task 1 responses and graphs. But for essays in particular, read. So extend your general knowledge by reading about topics or listening to podcasts or watching documentaries, but start reading and listening to general knowledge about topics that are possibly going to be the questions that you get on test day. So for task 2, that could be globalization, technology, the environment, travel, a number of different things. And this is just a small number of possible topics. There are many different ones. But the more that you read, the more you will have a range of vocabulary and an understanding of ideas. I'm not sure if anyone here has taken IELTS before and they got an essay question and they thought, I don't know about this topic. I studied mathematics or engineering at university, and this question is asking me about art or some other topic that I don't feel confident writing about. By doing this reading, you will not only improve your language, but you'll also improve your knowledge of the topics and your ability to write about them. My tip 6 is to use your time wisely. So it's important to remember the time limit for each writing task and to make sure that you manage your own time. So for example, if you have, you have 60 minutes. Now, nobody will tell you to move from task 1 to task 2. So you will not get a warning that someone will say, okay, you have spent 20 minutes on task 1, move to task 2. So you need to remember to stop working on one task and move to another. Now, task 2 is worth more than task 1. So if you wish, you can start with task 2. You should spend around 40 minutes on task 2 and around 20 minutes on task 1, but make sure that you judge that time. So remember the time limit for each writing task. Do them in the order that you like, and remember task 2 is more important. Then you have 20 minutes for task 1 and 40 minutes for task 2, and you need to divide that time to make sure that you have time to do everything you need. So, for example, for the essay, for the 40 minutes for the essay, and don't check my mathematics here, I am an English teacher, remember, I just had a terrible fear about that. So you could divide your time like this. You do planning and brainstorming, and this includes reading the question for around 4 minutes. Now, I have had a lot of students tell me that they don't plan, that planning is not helpful, and that it is a waste of time. I would highly recommend that you spend time planning, not too long, 4 minutes is okay, but this will save you time. And I've already talked about how it's important to stay on topic and answer the question. Planning will help you with that, okay? Now then, you can move on to writing the parts of your paragraph. Now we had four sections before, so we've divided those evenly. However, you may find that your conclusion may be a little bit faster, so you could save some time there, or perhaps you find your introduction a little bit faster, so you could save some time there to spend on the paragraphs. And then lastly, and again, I highly recommend that you save time for editing and checking. I'll talk more about what to look for when editing and checking in a moment, but editing and checking is really important. If you are typing or writing It is natural to make mistakes, and going back and editing means that you can find those mistakes. Now, to move up the band score for grammatical accuracy or lexical resource or in those areas, you need to make less errors. And going through and editing and checking may mean that you find a couple or 3 or 4 errors. And this could actually move you up a band score in an area. So editing and checking is key. It is tough though, especially in a second language. So it's something you'll have to practice, but saving time for that is very important. Also, while you're doing your exam, check the clock. So don't just think of the time as 40 minutes or 20 minutes. Check the clock when you finish a paragraph to make sure that you're on time. And any extra time you have, check grammar, check vocab, and check paragraph structure. And again, planning is really, really important. So as I just talked about, when you plan your ideas, you're more likely to stay on topic and your writing will become more efficient. So I've spent many years as a teacher trying to convince my students to plan. So I'm hoping that today I've convinced some of you of the real importance of planning. Even on IELTS day when you feel really stressed and you think there's not enough time, really try planning when you're practicing and see how it goes. And I really think it will make a difference in your writing. My tip 7, which I have spoken about a little bit already, is to make sure that you understand the public band descriptors. So the public band descriptors can help you understand what you need to do to get a specific band score, what can stop you from getting a higher band score, and what areas you can focus on improving. So for this will be different for different people, depending on the test that you are taking and depending on the band score that you are aiming for. So it's really key that you understand. So my advice is to get the public band descriptors, download them, print them out, or maybe that's my age showing that people print things, but get the public band descriptors and look at the band score that you are aiming for. Perhaps this is a 6.5 or a 7, but highlight the area that you're looking at and look at exactly what you need to do in task 1 and task 2 to get the band score that you need. But then, and make sure that you look up any words you don't understand, speak to someone if you need clarity, ask someone who speaks strong English at work, ask a friend, ask a teacher. But it's really key. If you don't understand something in the band scores, ask. But then also look at the band score above what you need and look at the band score below what you need and understand what could stop you from going higher and what could make you go lower. And then see where you're in the middle. So why are you in there? Why aren't you getting up? And why aren't you going down to another band score? And then start having a look at your writing and see how you can improve. So spending time with those spending time with the public band descriptors and really understanding them can really help you focus your writing. As we've said, you only have a certain amount of time and you have a word limit that you need to stick to. So really understanding these band descriptors can make sure that every word counts and every word is maximizing your chance to increase your score. So I spoke about this shortly before, but another real key area that can help you is if you are editing. So that's really hard to do. If someone gives you a piece of writing and says, edit this, it can be really hard to know. So my advice is to understand which errors you make. Now, people tend to make specific types of errors. This might be because of the native language that they speak, because sometimes our native language impacts on the way that we write or speak in our second language. So it could be an influence from that, and it might be something that is common between you and your classmates. Also, sometimes people just make different types of errors, and it's really important that you understand which type you make. Now, errors can have a significant impact on your band score. So knowing which errors you make allows you to do two different things. First, you can focus your grammatical preparation on improving that type of error. Also, you can edit for that specific type of error. So some really common mistakes or errors that students may make are subject-verb agreement. So for example, the verb does not match the subject, spelling, punctuation, the incorrect tense, missing or extra articles or incorrect articles like the, and an, or incorrect word forms. So for example, using the verb communicate when you need to use the noun communication. So identifying which of these you commonly make. To do this, you might like to ask someone to have a look at your writing, or you can go through and actually have a look and check these kind of manually. Look at subject-verb agreement. Are they incorrect? And run something through spell check. Are you making a lot of spelling mistakes? What type of spelling mistakes are you making? Even run something through grammar check on Microsoft Word and see what type of grammar mistakes you're making, and then use that to inform your preparation and your editing on test day. Similarly to this in relation to grammar and vocabulary, my tip 9 is that you should make sure that you use complex grammar and vocabulary. So using a range of complex language is important. So if you wrote an essay, a letter, or a response that had no mistakes, had no errors, so in terms of accuracy, it was perfect. But if it was very simple, if it used very simple sentences, simple language, you would probably not get the band score that you are aiming for, because as well as being accurate, your language must also be complex. The IELTS examiners are looking to see that you can achieve accuracy at a certain level of complex language. So you need to make sure that you include a range of complex language. Now for grammar, this includes adverb clauses, so sentences like when, while, although, and even though. It also includes noun clauses like that, why, when, and where, as well as adjective clauses like which, where, why. So there's a range of grammar that you can use. We're also talking here about things like passive voice, noun phrases, and a range of different grammatical grammar that you can use. But also, we're also looking at lexical complexity. So lexical complexity means using less common vocabulary. So making sure that we're not using the vocabulary that you first learn when you learn English. So words like good or bad, they would not be classed as less common vocabulary. They would be simple vocabulary. So taking opportunities to use more complex vocabulary can help increase your band score. So instead of a word like good, we would be looking to probably use a word like beneficial or positive. Now, this does two things. First, it increases the complexity, but it also helps with the development of your ideas, because the word good is not just simple, but it's also quite general. And so we need to make sure that we're using specific words to explain our ideas. So that's less common vocabulary. Now, it's also important in terms of lexical complexity that we paraphrase. Now, this is true through all the tasks. What we need to, you'll often find that you need to either repeat an idea. Oh, sorry, it's there's a big storm here. I'm not sure if you can hear the thunder. I apologize if I'll try and speak more loudly. But when we paraphrase, we may need to repeat ideas. For example, when we write an essay, we need to repeat the main idea. And it's important that we paraphrase and use different synonyms and word forms so that we don't repeat the same words. Another example of this is in task 1 of the academic test, where you have to describe a graph now, or a graphic. Now, often this involves describing increases, decreases, and amounts. Now, if someone were to write a response that used the word increase 10 times, that would not be a range of lexical complexity. That's not complex language, and it's not a range of language. So we need to make sure that we're looking at using different words. If we want to say increase a couple of times, we can say increase, we can say rise, or we can use the noun. So we're looking at paraphrasing, using different synonyms and using different word forms to make sure that we're meeting that lexical range. And then my last tip, and this is true for all academic tasks and general tasks, is to choose the correct style. So the style that you should write with is fairly formal. A good rule of thumb is to think about vocabulary or grammar or vocabulary that you would use in front of your teacher. And if you don't feel comfortable saying that word in front of your teacher or maybe your parents, don't use it in IELTS writing. So I'm talking about avoiding slang or colloquialisms, idioms. So making sure that the language that you use is fairly academic. Now, it doesn't need to be incredibly formal. We're not talking to the Queen, but we need to make sure that it is at a certain formal level. So avoid slang, also avoid contractions. What that means is words like don't and can't. So we should write the 2 words. Avoid using I, you, we, us. The reason for this is not that it's grammatically incorrect, but the reason for this is that, particularly with the essay and with the graph, you're being asked to give an academic description, not to talk directly to the person reading the task. They want to know about the topic and they would like to know about the graph. So we don't need to bring in those personal ideas. Also avoid starting sentences with words like but, and, or so. They should be linked in a sentence rather than starting a new sentence. Avoid asking questions. So we often see in writing, particularly in essays, that students will, or test takers will ask a question, perhaps at a certain part of the essay. This is most common in essays, but we would avoid asking questions. Remember that you are answering a question. So if you wish to express the idea of a question, you can do that in another way, but you wouldn't ever use a question mark in any of your writing. You shouldn't be asking questions. Avoid generalizing and exaggerating. So we're looking to make, again, academic kind of descriptions or clear descriptions. We don't want to make generalizations. The reason for this is that they're usually not true, and it takes away from your ability to construct and develop your arguments. And it's really important that you develop your arguments. General training task 1 is a little bit different, but again, I would say in general training task 1 with the letter, I would say if you're not comfortable using this language around a teacher, don't put it in the letter. So you'll need to choose informal, formal or semi-formal based on your letter type. So you have different types based on who you're writing to. So you can be a little bit less formal. So you definitely probably need to use you or I or we at times in your letter. But you still need to be careful not to use slang, a large amount of slang or colloquialisms. Another reason to avoid these is that they often don't translate from languages. So if you think there's some slang or an idiom in your native language, it may not translate and it may be confusing. So even though you may sometimes be a little less formal, you should still make sure you maintain a neutral and polite style in your letter. Okay, so they're my top 10 tips for IELTS writing. I will stop sharing my screen now that Alex is back.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you.
That was a spectacular webinar, and thank you for all of the insights and tips. We have received a lot of engagement on Zoom and Facebook. Questions are still coming in. Are you ready to answer some of them?
Yep, I'm ready.
Beautiful. And I'm really glad that we're on time. So we will have 20 minutes to answer questions. So that's a lot of time. So the first question from Zoom is, how many linking words in a paragraph is considered an overuse of cohesive devices?
It's hard to say a number, but I wouldn't like to ever say an exact number, but and just to remember that they are quite short paragraphs. So they're a lot shorter than probably, or definitely a paragraph that you would write in a university essay. A good rule to remember is that you do not need a linking word for every sentence, a cohesive device for every sentence. So if we had every sentence beginning with a word like as a result or however, then we would maybe be looking at an overuse of cohesive devices. Also, there are other ways to link sentences. So there's cohesive devices such as however, as a result, but there's also other ways like pronoun referencing, the fanboys like for, and, nor, but, different ways to link. So I'd say if it's every sentence, you're probably looking at an overuse.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rose. The next question is, how can we learn when to use a short sentence and when to use a long sentence?
Okay, so I think that often our goal when we're learning a second language is for the production or the writing in that language to start to feel natural. So our goal is to start thinking as much as possible in that language rather than thinking in our native language and then producing. So in order to start to know when to use which vocabulary and grammar, my biggest tip would be spend as much time as possible in English. So whether that's reading, doing grammar exercises, or speaking or listening, just surround yourself by English and you will start to hear different uses of language and different strong English speakers speaking in different or writing in different ways. Probably the biggest the best way to do this is reading, and read a range of different texts. It doesn't have to be reading to study for IELTS. It can be anything. What reading does is it goes into your brain and you start to take in those grammatical structures. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rose. The next question is, will we get marked down for using passive voice?
So the IELTS examiners won't go through and take marks off if you use a certain type of grammar or a certain word. So there's not a type of grammar that there's minus points or, however, if you were overusing a certain grammatical structure, such as passive, or if you were using a grammatical structure such as passive incorrectly, grammatically correctly, but logically incorrectly, then this could impact your band score. It's not so much about being marked down. It's more about using the grammar correctly and how this could impact either accuracy if it's incorrectly used, or impact your range if you're overusing passive. It can also impact development sometimes if you use too much of one grammar type. So just make sure that you're using the grammar correctly for the description or development that you would like.
Great, thank you, Rose. The next question would be, how do we plan and brainstorm? Can you give any example or advice?
Okay, so my first piece of advice would be that it gets easier the more that you practice. So I'm not sure if you have been in an IELTS test or some type of test and you're given a question and your brain goes blank. Many of my students say, I just can't think of ideas.
Yes.
So the more you read, and the more that will help, but also practice brainstorming. So you may not have time to write all the possible question types. What you probably might have time for is just to practice brainstorming. So there are lists of questions, IELTS questions online. Get questions and just spend 2 or 4 minutes for each question, just practicing brainstorming. You don't have to write them, just practice brainstorming. When you're practicing, it can be a good idea to think of a number of ideas. On IELTS test day, you'll probably only need 2 of those ideas. But while you're developing your brainstorming skills, if you can think of 10 ideas in 4 minutes, then do that. And over time, it will get easier, I promise.
Agreed, Rose. I said for IELTS, and brain fog is a real issue. So
yeah,
yes, the more practice you have, the easier it gets, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you for this. The next question is, you mentioned it would not be appropriate to ask questions in our essay. How about rhetorical questions to drive home our points when writing?
So would still avoid, actually, if it would be a good idea to avoid question marks. So anything that needs a question mark in your essay should be avoided. Definitely also this is different for the letter. The letter is a little bit different, but for the graph description and the essay, if what you need to write would need a question mark, then you should try and think of a different way to say that. So for example, if you were writing an essay and you wanted to write, is the internet causing harm for children? Question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It would be better to phrase that in a way that shows that there are questions in this area, but doesn't ask a question. So instead of that, you could write something like, there are questions about the harm the internet causes children. Or many people disagree, or people argue about whether the internet harms children. So you can use words like if or whether or noun clauses to express the idea of a question without asking a question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rose. The next question is, I keep scoring a band 6 in writing. What can I do to help me get a higher score?
Okay, so in addition to the 10 tips from earlier.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay, so tip 11. No, I think that overall, without knowing your specific circumstances or what's happening with your writing, or even if it's academic or general, I would say that one thing that I sometimes see students doing in order to improve their band score is just writing practice questions. And this is important. It is important to write to practice for a number of reasons that I outlined, but sometimes if we just keep writing practice questions, we just keep making the same errors again and again, and actually kind of making them stronger. So the first thing I would say is really try and look at your responses. So if you can do a practice, and if you can have someone help you look at them and kind of understand what's happening in your writing, whether this is a teacher or a strong English speaker that you know, maybe a colleague at work, if you can get some feedback on your writing rather than just working on it by yourself. Sometimes we need to reach out to other people to get some feedback. And then instead of just kind of writing, really make a targeted plan as to what you're going to do to start to improve your writing. And this might not involve writing practice essays or responses for quite a while. It might involve focusing on a specific type of language or doing some more reading. So think about your experience on test day as well. How do you feel? Did you have brain fog? Did you struggle to develop your ideas? And then make a plan that's specified to you.
Right, thank you, Rose. Next question is, in discussion essays, we don't necessarily need to state some people believe that, etc. Should we rather focus on the arguments behind the given views, not on the people saying about those views?
I think I am. So in discussion essays, yeah, you need to make sure that you are looking at the reason. Was it the reasons behind the views?
The arguments behind the given views. So should we focus on the arguments behind the views, not on the views?
So you need to make sure that you develop your ideas clearly. So it's not enough just to say some people argue this and not explain, I guess, the reasons behind that. So it's about developing the ideas. So thinking about, so if some people argue this or some people believe this, looking at what that actually means and looking at what that view is and developing that. Because you do need to make sure that you develop your ideas clearly, and rather than just making a statement and then moving on and not looking at that in detail.
Right, thank you, Rose. I guess we have only one more question left before we wrap up. So in discussion essays, oh, hold on, I think this is the one, I've just asked it. So the other one is, we are told to avoid using the pronoun I in our essays in the question type where we are asked our opinion. What's the best way to go about it in the introduction of the essay?
Oh, yes, sorry. So you could sometimes possibly say, I agree, or I disagree with the question in the thesis statement. Sorry, when I was talking before about I, you, we, it was more an overuse of I throughout the whole essay. Right. In your thesis statement, there's definitely a place for using that. So make sure that you do clearly say what your thesis is. But yeah, just avoid saying kind of I think throughout the whole essay.
Beautiful. I think these are all the questions for today. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much.
If we didn't answer someone's question, please make sure to message us after the webinar. Rose, once again, thank you for joining us to share your knowledge and the brilliant insights. A further thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight and to our team who make this all possible. If you are looking for more IELTS preparation material, make sure to visit our website, ieltsidp.com, and follow us on our socials. You will find the links down below in the footer of our website. Also, go see our new IELTS Prepare Hub, as well as the webinar registration page, where you can register for more of our upcoming webinars. That's it for today. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time. Bye.